most rewarding aspects of this series is that it gives the opportunity to find exciting new talent and to show you how dynamic and creative our young people are. We try to present not only the established and well-known people who contribute to the texture of Canada, but also those who are just beginning to be recognized. In that way, this series is very much a journey of discovery. For in every corner of our country, there are people working to express their deeply felt vision of life and of what it is to be human in all its dimensions. One of these people is the artist Attila Richard Lukacs. It's a provocative name for a provocative artist, and it's his real name. It was given to him by proud parents who escaped from Hungary in 1956 and who, like so many refugees to Canada, remade their lives. His mother tells me he was always an original, and he always wanted to be an artist. After graduating from the Emily Carr College of Art and Design in Vancouver, he moved to Berlin, drawn by the sense of artistic energy there. Since then, he has known almost continuous success. Only 28, Attila has been shown in Berlin, Tokyo, London, Ontario, and England, and of course in Vancouver and Calgary. Recently, he made headlines because Maclean's magazine airbrushed a sex organ from one of his pictures. That's the traditional kind of confrontation that artists have always had with established middle-class society. And a country where Margaret Lawrence is banned from some schoolrooms isn't going to take Attila Lukacs lightly. See for yourself, and you'll understand why people as different as Elton John and a Vancouver lawyer collect him.
Painting is an easily acceptable art form. I mean, I could present images in a painting that, if they were presented photographically, they would be deemed pornographic.
Vancouver, the Diane Farris Gallery. It's the biggest opening of the season, and everyone has come out to see the latest from Attila Richard Lukacs. Lukacs is Canada's most controversial painter, and one of its best. Acclaimed by art critics both here and abroad, he's exhibited in Vancouver, Toronto, New York, and Cologne. His canvases sell for nearly $50,000. Elton John owns 2. Maclean's magazine recently retouched one painting before they printed it, then caught out, offered a red-faced apology. Tonight, Lukacs is nervous and noticeably uncomfortable. It's obvious he puts up with this, the business of art. Perhaps it's too direct. Lukacs likes the fringes of life. His paintings reflect that.
He surprises me, he angers me, he does all of those things that artists are supposed to do to people. When he stops doing those, then I will really be surprised.
The paintings carry meaning. They carry a great deal of information and knowledge. And they're the product of a young artist who is, in all of my years as an educator and being around young artists, developing young artists, I've never met anybody with such an intense appetite and curiosity and hunger for information.
These are images of the military in preparation for war. Just as America is set to unleash all its power on the Persian Gulf, these paintings come exploding from Lukacs' soul.
It's very much an exorcism of an adolescent juvenile fantasy. I'm laying out something for the public. And just by putting it out on the walls like this, I'm getting rid of it, getting it out of my system.
At first, these portraits of induction rituals seem benign parodies of recruitment posters. But in the context of all his work, they are the latest stop in a journey of self-realization, an exorcism of Lukacs' demons and fantasies. Joanne Burney-Dansker is the former director of the Vancouver Art Gallery. She's known Lukacs since he was a student.
I see a lot of his subject as being about marginalization, and and without pushing it too far, when you're living in Vancouver, you feel marginalised, and a lot of the landscape that we consider to be distinctive are the alleyways, are the back lanes.
It's to the back lanes of life Lukacs retreats after the opening. At 3 in the morning, he's at Graceland, a nightclub on a dark Vancouver alleyway. While slides of his paintings carousel, dancers pose and strut. And in the shadows, Attila Lukacs stands watching, neither joining the ritual nor outside it. You see yourself as outside that middle-class society?
Oh, I don't know. I'm probably as middle class as anybody else. I was raised that way. I have that background. But I don't see myself as part of that society so much. I think I do live on the perimeters of it.
It's from the perimeters, the margins, that Lukacs' first body of paintings, the disturbing monkey series, emerged. Traditionally, monkeys have been symbols of lust. Lukacs portrayed them in troubling visions of sadomasochistic pleasure. And it's the margins of social existence and beyond that his 20th century warriors inhabit. With his skinheads, Lukacs leapt from the traditional to the contemporary, to a symbolism of homosexual seduction, bondage, and power. Like his recent military paintings, these images surge from Lukacs' psyche. Working-class boys who love to fight, shave their heads, and wear steel-toed boots, a uniform made for fighting. It's a disturbing vision of fractured youth, and though it may look like social commentary, it takes its inspiration from something else.
There were these amazing omens upon my arrival. As we were coming through East Germany into West Berlin, the full moon was eclipsing, and as I arrived into Berlin, it was a total eclipse. And the next day I went out to the Olympic Stadium, and there were these Wagnerian storm clouds just rolling over like a huge blanket over the stadium. I just thought, I'd never seen anything like this, and I thought we were going to die.
What attracted Attila Lukacs to Berlin had, before World War II, attracted other artists and writers, W.H. Auden and Christopher Isherwood. After the war, as a free city in the middle of a communist state, Berlin continued to attract those on the fringes of life. Even today, with the wall down, it retains the edgy quality that spurs artists to create. Attila Lukacs couldn't resist it. In the last 3 years, he has turned out over 40 works.
I knew I was a figurative painter, and it was the last thing the international art scene was really interested in, except I knew that it was still very big in Germany. And so I wanted to go to Germany. I thought Germany would be a good place for me. I wasn't interested in London or Paris. Berlin was the only city in Germany I could identify with. I knew Berlin would be more exciting, more of a city for me.
Lukacs' studio is in an arch under Berlin's S-Bahn. Arriving each day at 3 in the afternoon, he paints until the early hours of the morning, working on up to 4 paintings at once. He has 17 to complete before his Vancouver opening.
When you look at those old masters and everything, I always wonder how they got those apples so brilliant and, the grapes so, see-through. That just comes from glazing. You get layers and layers of layers of glazes. And I can't be bothered to wait for all that time. The way I paint anyway, it doesn't make sense to do that, use that method. So I just use a thin wash and sometimes change the tonality.
Where would you pick that up? Where did you get that?
It's just a process. I mean, I don't know. It's definitely not invention.
No.
I mean, they would teach it in art school or anything like that. I wasn't really taught it in art school. I mean, there's nothing really to learn about this.
So as you saw it from back there, what was the matter? What were you trying to fix for very simple?
Oh, well, the figures were just all too much the same tone. I mean, when you see a group of figures together, two people, they don't always have the same flesh tone. So I try and change that a bit. Just because of the palette I use, the figures tend out looking too much alike in terms of the coloration. So that has to be altered. And I think that this, it's not much of a difference, but it helps me sleep better. I like to paint life size because, first of all, it's easiest for me. And secondly, if they're over life size, then they become too monumental. And if they're smaller than life size, they become too intimate. So with life size, it's sort of a one-to-one relationship with the viewer. The viewer can be more a part of the painting. And voyeurism has a lot to do with looking at my paintings.
Voyeurism?
Yeah, voyeurism, where the viewer is drawn in as voyeur into what's happening. People just see the sexual thing in it, just because of the relationship to my work before. But if you were to look at the same photograph that's taken from in the prospects for the academies, you wouldn't look at that photograph in terms of sexual context.
But I think the painting is sexual. I think it's rich and full of sexuality. Not necessarily homosexuality. I mean, it's kind of got a vibrancy to it.
Sure, I can see that, but I don't deny it. But I don't think that's the point of the painting.
And what is the point?
There is no point. If I could put in a few sentences or a paragraph or a page what it was about, then I'd better off being a writer. It's just that I choose to put it on canvas. So it's there for the viewer to interpret and read. I don't think I should have to explain it much more than that. And I don't think I really want to, because it ruins that for the person who's looking at it. And the thing about paintings is everyone has a different interpretation to it. And if I was to say, well, this is what this painting is about, and it's not about anything else, then that just closes the horizons on which you can see the piece.
You happy with it?
It's coming along. I think it'll be okay. I don't know if I can, yeah, I guess I can't say I'm happy with my painting when I'm done with it. But a painting can always be better. It can always be better. The only thing is to know when to stop and go on to something else.
It's interesting that you chose a path of life which basically means that you have to maintain your outsider stance. Do you feel that? Do you feel it in all aspects of your life? You have that outsiderness stamped into you?
I'm not so much an outsider. I think my art and my painting demands me to view things in that way.
We're doing this! We're getting on! The fear of war! You should understand! Because of the violence! They play the silence! Let go of the book! Let go of queer! They give it lies! I live in fear! But you will not think! And if anything, the only thing that I can see is that you're wrong! You'll be astray!
Although not all skinheads belong to the radical right, certain groups of them do. And if I was to portray them all as heroic working class heroes, I think that would be more offensive than to show something like that. I think it's probably offensive because people are not sure what they're looking at, and they really don't. They read the surface and don't try and read that much into the painting itself. I don't really consider that myself so much a skinhead. That would be a contradiction in terms, because first of all, I'm really not that working class.
Lukacs' deep commitment and his ability to confront his demons give him the power to observe and expose society's failings as he sees them. Just as his military figures are a metaphor for the decline of America, so his violent skinheads are a comment on Europe. And though he paints with a satiric humor, his works portray the enormous sexual and economic abuse of power in the world today.
You see all the ritualized aggression. You see all the displays of power. And whether or not it's in the Gulf or in the Mohawk crisis here in Canada, you see Lukacs' 20th century warriors. And when he talked about bodily rebellion, and you see on your television screen the Mohawks every night with their images of bodily rebellion against their own marginalization, all of a sudden these images, even the earlier images of the skinheads, suddenly have a relevance. His men are not exclusively or even necessarily gay men. They are skinheads who are marginalized. Many of his images and subject matter and figures are all marginalized. And I think that's still one of the more interesting aspects of his work.
Well, that's as though his painting technique itself, which is layered, is also layered in its conceptualization, which is that you have not only one level of marginalization, but you have 5 or 6.
Yes.
Lukacs was born in Calgary in 1962. In 1983, he was accepted into the Emily Carr College of Art and Design in Vancouver, and 2 years later graduated with honors. The following year, he was one of 4 artists the Vancouver Art Gallery brought together under the title Young Romantics, and with that exhibition came Lukacs' first national recognition and initial hints of his disturbing fantasies. Decided you were going to be not only an artist, but a painter. And I'm wondering what kind of choice went into that. Did you get encouragement when you were a child? Did you paint?
Sure. I think I was painting from day one, you know, and when I was 6 years old, and I was working with oil paints then. But I think what made me decide to be an artist is that I'm unemployable. I mean, I couldn't see myself doing anything else, so I might as well be an artist. And then painting was just my choice. Yeah, it does seem a funny choice, painting, because you're right, it is old as the hills. And actually, I think photography and other things like that, video with today's technical advances and everything, those should actually be more important in the context of 20th century art.
Aber das steht in den Sternen.
Lukacs arrived in Berlin with a keen technical ability and an appreciation of art history. And after 3 years, his perspective has broadened and deepened. Riding each day to his studio, Lukacs sees a vibrant city full of burgeoning energy about to reclaim its position in the world. But he also feels the dark, sadomasochistic past of Berlin, a past created by Nazi brutality and communist power. It's these political images which feed his art. The Wall, Checkpoint Charlie, Hitler's bunker, the old Gestapo headquarters, the Reichstag, the Brandenburg Gate.
Well, it's about 5 or 6 paintings on this scale, about 6 meters by 4 meters. And they're just going to deal with labor. For example, miners, these guys, street workers, steel workers, construction, manufacturing, machinery, just the kind of painting you would expect to find from early socialist early socialist monumental mural painting. You know, the glorification of the worker, the socialist proletarian working class hero type kind of thing.
Like Degas, Cézanne, and other artists, Lukacs uses photographs as part of his process of painting. Some he photographs himself. Some come from magazine ads. Some from leaflets. As well, a tradition of past masters has an authority for Lukacs.
Change. We're talking about something in a tradition. He's really in a tradition.
Yes, well, he says he's an 18th century painter who just happens to live in the 20th century, and only his subject matter is from this century.
I think one of the interesting things about 18th century that's immediately evident to anyone who loves pictures and painting is this series of the men in these positions.
Yes, well, the True North. The obvious reference that people see is the Blue Boy, Gainsborough's Blue Boy.
It's in Lukacs' Young Spartans, now in the London Regional Art Gallery in London, Ontario, that the influences of early painters are most prominent. The grouping on the right owes its beginnings to Caravaggio's Musicians, the one on the left to Degas' Rites of Spring.
I like those references back to other painters, to the whole tradition of painting, because not only is it a homage to it, but often it's a parody of it. And that's what keeps art going.
Yeah, my art history, the way I use it, is more like a fast food consumption of art history. Actually, I can't say it's much different than the way Manet used art history, or Cézanne. I mean, they also went through ripping through art history and said, well, I need these figures for that background, and that's what I'll use it, without really going into why did the painter do this. And
you've not only consumed it, Attila, though, you've digested it. That's the difference.
And spit it out.
What about his painting technique? I think that's one of the things that has always appealed to me, the thickness, the richness.
This is a 1986 work called This Little Boy, and it's been described by one critic as being excavated and almost like a ruin, as if there's an archaeological dig being conducted. And the way in which his materials, you know, the tar and the gold and the urethane, and all mixed in and then scraped and reworked. And I think that those elements of ruin, if you look at the earlier imagery, the painting method matches the subject matter, because a lot of those earlier images are about ruin. And that's why there's a different painting method in the more recent works. They're much glossier. It's more to do with advertising techniques, whether or not it's military advertising or somebody advertising Doc Marten boots. It's a slicker surface, it's a smoother surface.
But whether the subject matter requires a slick, smooth, glossy surface or a coarse melange of tar and gold, it's the sadomasochistic images of master and slave which have made Lukacs controversial. These images threaten our sense of decency, yet throughout these scenes of power and humiliation, bondage and pleasure, there is a static, arresting quality that challenges the viewer to react. And so these brutally aggressive scenes transcend private fantasy and include us as reluctant accomplices.
Well, the way I perceive it is, do you ever see a painting of Venus de Milo and people say it's heteroerotic? Just because there's a naked male figure in the painting. It's immediately classified as homoerotic. It's a real Victorian invention. I think people should get away with it, get over it.
So then why do you paint?
Because it's what interests me. I mean, if I was the other way around, I'd probably be painting skinhead chicks. But I'm not, so.
Well, of course, the latest exhibition with men in uniforms, there isn't a single muscle or bare buttock showing.
No titillation.
No titillation. But on the other hand, maybe uniforms are titillating to certain people. I'd like to know.
I don't know. I'm wondering if he has been concerned about the aspect of exploitation and titillation. Not just the art community, but even people within the gay community said this is exploitative, and the fact that the male gaze is now on men instead of women doesn't make it any less exploitative. So I don't know whether or not the newer work is in fact, and including those pieces that he did, purely abstract pieces on Berlin, is not an attempt to change his subject matter, to maybe minimize that titillation.
Then, in the end, Lukacs paintings are a personal exorcism of his fantasies, then it is ours as well. He forces us to think about ourselves and what our consumerized, democratic, liberal society has become. That despite its promise of freedom and equality, it has created a disenfranchised culture. The punished and the punishers, a world full of outsiders living on the margins of life. And so we view his work, smiling as he would have us do at some images, but fearful of others.
I think artists are a filter for others to see themselves in the world through, and I think that is the ultimate meaning of the work. And then it'll be read, whichever way.
In Vancouver, the push to complete preparation for the opening is in high gear. There are flags to sew, military dog tags to give out, T-shirts to model, cars to park, critics to worry about, paintings to hang.
You know what's really very interesting in reading criticism about your work by art critics is that nothing is made very much of the humor in your work. I don't know if you feel it, but certainly that's something that I feel. I do not feel these paintings are dark, terrible visions.
Oh no, there's an incredible sense of humor.
They're very funny.
Yeah.
And I looked at people walking around, and very few of them were smiling. Is that the Canadian audience, or would you get a different feeling in Berlin? I mean,
I don't know why they don't see the sense of humor. For example, the painting with the cadet standing beside the tiger. I mean, that to me is a hilarious painting. Except somebody who was reviewing me, just like, could not believe that was an incredible, profound, very hard statement. Oh, it's nothing like that at all. It's just a really silly painting as far as I'm concerned. A silly image.
In the end, the real strength of Attila Lukacs' work is what he asks of us, his viewers. His images demand that we become part of them. He makes us essential to their completion. It's true that his paintings pulsate with sexuality and menace, but Attila Lukacs changes and challenges the way we see things. He jolts the viewer from complacency. And now he's on to a major show in Los Angeles, where he's sure to do it again. I'll be back in a moment.